All right, guys, good morning. Hi, my name is Nina Means. I'm the director for ACC Fashion Incubator, and you're here with me for Coffee Talk. This morning, I do have my cup of coffee. I wanted to just circle back to you guys about kind of where we left off last week, which is a really challenging conversation to have in a space where there's so much happening in the world right now. And we really wanted to make sure to circle back. I wanted to make sure to circle back about, just really where I left off about that because, things still have not, I'm thankful that the news cycle has not moved on from where we were this time last week. And in fact, there have been so many other issues that have come to light since then, regarding Black Lives Matter and these other issues that are happening. So as the pandemic, continues on, and as we're in the midst of really a unique moment of change for people of color everywhere, there's so much that we have we have to address, within ourselves, but also within our community. So our topic today was really about talking about how we're working in this hyper, markdown climate in terms of fashion and business and retail. And I will take some time to talk about that. But what I wanted to do first is just to level set and acknowledge, where it is that we've been and what's going on, in our world right now, because to sit here and start your week off as if nothing else is happening is really difficult to kind of start the week, kind of first setting yourself in place, as an entrepreneur, or as a small business or retailer, you're really thinking about, okay, what is it that my customer needs from me this week? You're getting your week started. And so we thank you for starting your week here with ACCFI. This is something that we really believe strongly in terms of our engagement in the community and creating a space for us to be able to talk genuinely about the things that are going on. So if you see us here again on Wednesday or on Friday, you'll get a chance to hear us talk about industry jobs like technical design on our workshop Wednesdays, where we're helping you to kind of unpack these ideas about what goes into a technical package and how does that happen. And if you've never worked that way, you're working in the Austin local industry or you're in other markets and you're learning about technical packages and how to work digitally, this is a great opportunity for you to do that here with us. And then on Friday, we get a chance to talk with retailers and other industry professionals who are really unpacking what these times mean. And so we get a bit of one-on-one time with people who are on the front lines in terms of reopening retail, but also with industry vets that really know our business. They really know our industry. So what I wanted to talk to you guys about today, this is really just something that I see a lot of, businesses struggling with right now because this is happening so much across the board because of just the change in unemployment rates are quite high right now. And, it's really been difficult for a lot of people, but that also means that it's also difficult for business, right? And so whenever we're trying to figure out how do we navigate ourselves in a space where a lot of these large companies are in a severe markdown phase, how do smaller businesses compete and can you compete? Is that something that you should be trying to do? And do you see it that way? Are you genuinely in competition or is it just another part of the landscape? So, I wanted to kind of talk through, I actually jotted down some particular notes that are, some anecdotal just from, different businesses I've spoken to, and also just an observation of what's happening in the markdown space in general. I don't want to rush through this so much because I know that, we've got about a half an hour here together, but I wanted to take a minute just to get it, to kind of walk through, what we're observing. We're seeing it on Instagram. If you're an avid Instagram shopper or Pinterest, where people are shopping through Pinterest as well, or looking at some of the promotional items that are happening in your Google. I use Gmail for everything. And so, whenever it segments all of my, promotional emails and my social emails and then my actual emails, I went through my promotionals um, again, like I typically do, just to see if there are any good deals in there, right? And, we're so much in a markdown culture anyway. But this has really kind of been another layer, a completely different setup that has been much more aggressive, I think, in the markdown space due to the change of what's happening around us. And so a lot of times people, and I think I'm saying this mostly for emerging designers more so than for, larger businesses who've been at this for a long, long time. What's happening politically, what's happening socially, what happens, globally, all of that is impacting our business, and all of that is impacting how we connect with our customer. And so without really having a genuine pulse on what's happening in that space, you will probably fall flat in this area as well if you're not really paying attention to what the needs actually are. And then also looking at what happens at different segments of the population. What percentage of people are losing their jobs and at what bracket, and how much is your bracket or your customer genuinely being affected by what you're seeing. And, as much as we don't want to hyper segment, you have to in some regards in terms of business, because you'll need to know who it is that you're speaking to and what their reality actually is. You may find that even if there's, a percentage over the entire country regarding unemployment, you may find that a percentage may be more focused in your customer market than others, or vice versa. You may find that you have less in your customer market affected than others. And so all of that is really key information. But on top of those kind of physical numbers, the psychological impact of going through a time like this is also important. And so all of this is kind of playing into how we feel about, promotions and markdowns and all of this. It's not just it's not just about the product anymore, really. It's really about how we're feeling about the product and if this is a good time to spend on things that make you feel good, or things that are things that you don't actually need right now, or things that you've always wanted to try, or things that you really don't have a purpose for, but you're hoping at some point in the future you'll get a chance to go out and have dinner, or you'll be in that meeting in the actual boardroom and not on a Zoom call. Or maybe, there's other things that you're finding that will be of more value to you in the future than they are right now. So all of these things are kind of playing into what's getting marked down and why. As I've been going through my promotional inbox, as I mentioned before, we're kind of looking through, just kind of what's happening. I'm seeing like 15% off, which probably isn't getting a click, to be honest. And then all the way up to 60 to 70% off, and within that first line of the email. So you may see 25% off. Okay, that's an improvement from 15. But then in the first line of the email that's kind of previewed there, kind of in that light gray, it'll say something like, up to 70% off. And you're like, okay, well, that may be worth clicking to find out what may be in the 70% off range if you're kind of a value bargain shopper like so many of us are. There's nothing wrong with that. Money is tight. And so people are making decisions about where and how they spend their money. And so they're looking for that. But I think that whenever we name this talk, competing in an extreme markdown climate, we may need to kind of revise competing to surviving an extreme markdown climate. That's going to be key during this time, because for a lot of businesses, they're sitting on a variety of things that I'll talk about later that are going to impact their ability to participate or not participate in some of these markdowns that are happening, and how they strategically engage in that. Retailers have had secret sauce around markdowns for so long. So there's definitely ways that, businesses have, strategically gone about their markdown intentions. But I'm telling you, this time with COVID-19 and the global pandemic and what's happening with Black Lives Matter and what's happening across the board, there are so many things that are being turned on their head, things that have been changing in a way that has put people off balance to, where I think that a lot of the things that you would have typically done at certain times of the year are now not working or may need to be activated in order to keep sales at a decent level. For a lot of people, we were talking with a specialty store last week during ACCFI Presents, and she was telling me, their March, April, May delivery is, that's spring, and early summer. And so for a lot of retailers, that's when a lot of their product is coming in. And so imagine having purchased those goods like, 6, maybe 8 months earlier for them to be arriving in store, late February, early March, and it being too late for you to cancel. And you've got all this beautiful product that you planned for your customer, and now there's a pandemic and the store is closed. So how do you get that product out the door? And so this is kind of creating a need, to incentivize customers to spend it anyway, right? To say, you never thought you could get this brand new dress markdown out the door. We just got it in for 40% off or 70% off for some brands. And so this is really how they're helping to kind of keep their brands moving forward. For some, it's not even about being in the black. It's just about not sitting on mounds and mounds of inventory when it comes to the late summer and early fall, where we're hoping that we'll see some shift. But, right now, as we're kind of dealing with a lot of the reopening, last week in Texas, we saw that we had a record spike, a record high of hospitalizations due to the pandemic last Monday. And so, that was just a week ago. And so we're really in a space where, unfortunately, we are seeing kind of longer term effects, of this. And we were hoping that it would just kind of be here and gone. But, even as we're reopening, we're seeing a lot of states that are climbing back up into the growing rates of COVID-19 cases as opposed to things declining. So all of this is contributing to what we're seeing in, what I'm talking about, this extreme markdown climate. So like, what do you do whenever you're a retailer and you've, you brought in all of this product, you mark it down and you hope to get as much of it out the door as possible. So, brands, some of the brands that I was actually surprised to see, that aren't typically marked down or kind of, participating more in the race, like not a clothing brand, but because this is Coffee Talk, Nespresso, I saw sent me I don't normally get the promotional things from them. Periodically, they'll introduce a new flavor or something like this. But Nespresso sent me 25% off, and it was like off of their actual machines, like the things like their technology. And so I was like, oh, maybe, but again, you're like, who convincing you to spend your dollars with them and in things that you typically wouldn't get discounts on during this time of the year. There's also the well-timed semi-annual sale, right? So for those of us who know Nordstrom or Victoria's Secret, this is the time of the year when they would typically be offering their semi-annual sale, kind of going into the June and July months. For those of you who aren't, really familiar, normally in those transition months, and we call them, because that's what they are, the J months, January, June, and July, those are the J months where those are typically transitional months in retail. And a lot of times what you'll see during the J months are, discounts, or really great value product that gives you a reason to purchase. And so all of these things are part of, excuse me. Okay. All of this, my eye doctor telling me that they're reopening tomorrow. So all of these things are a part of the, the markdown moment that we're seeing, right? Because it's not just what's happening in, COVID-19 and all of the, movements that are happening across the world. It's also the time of the year that would typically be challenging already. So you're seeing a lot of compounded experience in this space because of how, things are going right now. It's difficult to transition, during this time, anyway, but now you're layering all these other issues that are making it difficult to transition into the next season as well. Are people even really thinking about your brand during this time? Maybe, maybe not. And if so, why? And how are they thinking about your brand? I wanted to kind of give a few different things to kind of think about in this space, so even whether you're emerging brand or designer, or if you are a larger specialty store or larger business, I'm sure everyone's asking themselves the hard questions while also trying to promote and move product. How are people thinking about you? Why are people thinking about you? What purpose do you serve in their life right now? And are you a priority? And that's something that we have to kind of take a good hard look at in terms of what's going on in people's lives across the board. It's never going to be enough just to just do the same things that we've always done. It's going to be on retailers during this extreme markdown culture to find ways to cut through the noise of markdown, to be able to authentically connect to your customer. I keep saying this again and again, week after week: authentic engagement, authentic engagement, authentic engagement. It is so key right now. And it should have been key before, and I believe that it was to some degree. But right now, because of all the tensions that are running so high, all of the issues that we're seeing across the board, health, race, well-being, everything, it's so key that you really take the time to understand your customer. I talk a little bit about this in my talk last week. So if you want to go back to my YouTube talk from last week on current events, feel free to go back to that particular talk. We'll link that here. Perhaps in the next, whenever we go post this one. But I wanted to just make a note of that. Let's just be honest. There are certain things that your customer is doing now that they weren't doing. We're going to take a quick shift. When I get ready in the morning, what I decide to put on my face, what I decide to put on my top, all of that's determined on whether or not I'm going live, or if I am going to just be on emails during the day, or if I don't have any meetings scheduled with other people outside of my business unit. Those decisions are being made. And so based on what my lifestyle changes are, that's going to determine whether or not I'm thinking about what your brand is offering. And so how I'm fitting myself into my customer's new lifestyle is really going to be everything. And I think a lot of specialty stores and small business have done a really good job of doing this. I've seen more of the larger department stores and a lot of the larger retailers just marking everything down to try to move product, but I haven't seen them be able to activate what some of the smaller businesses have been able to do, which is to actually meet the customer's need directly. And so I think that's actually a superpower of small business during this time. Is that I think I've seen more unique activations of meeting customer needs in the smaller spaces than I have in some of the larger spaces personally. I think that you really are going to have to think about, what do they need from you for real? There's times whenever you're like, oh, yes, I'd love to get, more of what I would typically purchase, but not as much of it as I typically have. I don't need as many of them, and I may not need the same kind, or I may a different fabrication now that I'm spending most of my time at home, or because now instead of my toddler going to daycare, I'm caring for my toddler at home, and so my clothes need to do different things. Silk blouse in the office is different than my silk blouse at home, right? And so there's certain things that I may be looking for that may be a different fit for my lifestyle than what it is that I was doing before. So there are all these things that have to change, that have needed to change based on my disposable income, based on, and I'm saying my as a customer, based on disposable income, based on my lifestyle, based on my needs. And so all of those things are kind of getting wrapped up into how we're responding and how we're competing and surviving markdown. The larger brands can afford to mark down more aggressively, but you as a small business, you may be still priced in a value space, but you're actually still able to meet the customer's needs and demands much quicker on a drop of a dime, as opposed to some of these larger organizations. And I'll kind of talk a little bit more about that as well, but we've only got a few more minutes left, so I don't want to skip ahead too much. But what I wanted to kind of address as well is, what about pricing? Because that's really the core of it, right? Because as retailers, what we're concerned about ultimately is about that initial markup, and what we're able to move during this climate. So, whenever we think about, okay, well, what's my profit margin on new product? Now it may be a bit sharper. It may not be as high as the percentage that I typically get, but it's going to be about the volume of product that I move at the value that my customer needs it. And so what that's going to do, I might need to repeat that again. It's going to be about the volume of the product that I move at the value of the product that my customer needs it. So I hope that that's clear. So, how much product can I move at a price point that my customer can afford? That's essentially what I'm saying. So how do we get that in front of the customer and engage more strategically? One of the things that we talked about a few weeks ago, I had Otto here from Adolphine Group. He has the brand League of Rebels here in Austin, Texas. And, he's been doing really incredible work across the board. But one of the things he told me that he did was he actually invested in some additional product that they actually just do through like eBay and Amazon that was specific towards a piece of equipment that would be really useful for people right now. It was like a touchless, what was it? It's like a wand. It's like a dialing wand. And so literally, like if you were at the gas station or if you were at the, ATM or wherever it is that you needed to go, that, whenever you have to dial in your number, your zip code, whenever you're having to do your pump your gas, you can actually use this and keep everything touchless. And so it was a really helpful thing. I believe it's Crater with a K, Krater. If you go online and look them up, you can find some of these things. It's pretty cool. But he did that in addition to the League of Rebels brand, which is a sartorial menswear label, completely different business, but things that are helping people continue to move forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about why that's so special later, kind of as an illustration in another part of the talk. But, I think that things like this are really key during a moment where these are all ways that people are surviving, competing and surviving during this extreme markdown climate. How are you diversifying product that your customer needs and being able to meet that in a way that's authentic and to be able to actually set up a space to sell something that may be in a space that's separate from your original business that allows you to continue to move forward. So it's financing things that are not taking away from your label. So that's also something to consider. So I did mark out just a few different areas that I really want you guys to be thinking about. This is really regarding just a few different buckets, but I do want to, kind of get back into, at the end, I'll kind of loop back into why I mentioned Crater and League of Rebels. But, right now, in a space where, this markdown culture is so intense, there's just a few areas that I believe that emerging brands and small businesses can really lean into. And I believe that they can own this in a way that's unique to them, that's different from large retailers. So right now, regarding your inventory, keep it low, guys. If there's not, purchase orders against it, or if there's not, things that are already spoken for, or you have a better idea of what your demand is, and you just got a small percentage above that going into production, keep that inventory low. There's nothing worse than sitting on inventory and having that liability follow you from season to season. There's no need to do it. I think that, typically we've done it in the space of, overseas development, and developing to try to meet minimums. But really, wherever you can fight to keep that inventory number low, that's going to really serve you in the long term. Sustainability, keeping it environmentally conscious. Right now, where people are really looking to drive value and to connect are with brands that are still wanting to make sure not to contribute to yet another problem. So taking a stand on value-based business is still key during markdown, because it's not just another wasted, pretty shirt. It's not just another, blue blouse. It's really about, investing in brands that are doing something that people can see. People are much more environmentally conscious than they've ever been. People are much more racially conscious than they've ever been. People are much more health conscious than they've ever been. Speak to those needs. Speak to it, and speak to it authentically, and in these spaces where sustainability and being conscious is so important, transparency is just as important. So where it's made, last week we talked about cultural referencing. Again, you can reference my talk from last week, but transparency about where did you pull the reference from culturally for that garment, and what is it inspired by, and allow that to really inform your customer how much more there is to love about what it is that you do. It wasn't just another trend trend report that you found that said cobalt or classic blue is the new blue. It was so much more than that. And so when you give people more to love, they tend to love you more in return. So give people more to love with your transparency. Lastly, really going back to this price point issue, because that's really the core of what we are addressing here today, is, it's really about attainable and value conscious pricing. It's about attainable and value conscious pricing during this point. So it doesn't mean that you have to suspend, wherever it was that you were in the price point space. It just means that there needs to be an opportunity to redevelop into your opening price point if for some reason your product does not meet that attainable and value conscious pricing space. So, and also knowing what that means for your customer. Now, attainable or open price point may be, different depending on the brand. If I'm trying opening price point, guys, just to quickly unpack it, it just means, what's the first offering in my product assortment? What's the lowest cost item, lowest priced item in my assortment, so that whenever people are trying me for the first time, that's the opening price point. That is, the first thing that they get by participating in my brand. So if it's at Michael Kors, and I'm guessing on the price because I don't have their pricing memorized, it's their, little crossbody bag, and it's the very first Michael Kors handbag you've ever purchased, and it's $250, that's their opening price point for that line. Now, they do keychains and they do other things. So really opening price point would probably be around $35 for like a keychain, right? That's the more attainable and value conscious side of what they're doing. Now, if you are a different kind of brand, that price may fluctuate. And again, this is where your customer and what opening price point means to them, and what is appropriately priced at that point. That can vary from brand to brand. It's just, what's the first place that we try you? What's the first place that we are able to experience your brand? So really, this is really an opportunity to redevelop products that are useful and needed during these spaces that I was mentioning before, that are addressing the social need that we're seeing, the health need that we're seeing, and the environmental needs that we're seeing at the opening price point. Valuable, attainable pricing at that product. So think very consciously about what that is. If there are things that can be private labeled for specialty stores, or brands that are developing into this space that you can support. These are all ways to collaborate and cross-pollinate one another's business from the specialty store space, and the emerging brand space. So these are all opportunities to connect. Emerging brands are really making themselves incredibly useful during this time. And I really applaud all of those emerging brands for really sticking it out during this time, and pivoting beautifully, in this climate. This has really been such a huge challenge. But I've seen you pick up the mantle of face coverings. I've seen some really beautiful ones developed at various price points, using materials that are already in your stock to be able to create them, and thinking through what it looks like to do that, year round, seasonally, and what that could mean. So, for our experiences, it's a lot faster to steer a speedboat than it is a cruise ship. So take advantage of everything that there is there for you to actually do. So, again, I just want to applaud all the emerging brands that I'm seeing, all the small businesses that we're seeing, and be aware that, these opening price point opportunities are really there for the taking for a lot of you, where you're probably sitting on yards and yards of material that was intended for another collection, but now you can actually repurpose into creating things that are needed at a different price point, that could be incredibly useful to you as well. So, you're, competing in an extreme markdown climate may actually be surviving at an extreme markdown climate. And we're hoping for your sake that it's thriving in an extreme markdown climate, knowing that you're in a very unique situation to be able to do things that are not typical during this time or space. But feel free, if you ever feel like you want to reach out to us to ask us more questions about what else you could be doing with your business. We talk to and refer and consult with a lot of small businesses and retailers. So feel free to reach out to us at ACC Fashion Incubator through all of our social media handles, as well as sending us a quick email on fashion.incubator@austincc.edu. So again, we're always available, and we're primarily interested in just developing the market and helping the market to continue to grow. And so feel free to email us or send us a quick note at fashion.incubator@austincc.edu. And we are available on all of our social media handles at ACC Fashion Incubator. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. This is Nina Means from ACC Fashion Incubator. And we are looking forward to seeing you again on Wednesday for Workshop Wednesdays, and on Friday for our ACCFI Presents. We'll be back with Sam Alexander as our guest. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Thanks.